Hello everybody, Andy from Glass Half Dead here, and today we're going to do the world's favourite. It's a tier list. I haven't done a tier list for ages because I don't think they kind of need to be updated too often, but we know Gallowfall's coming soon, so I figure why not do a tier list now, and then I can do another one kind of just before the next season releases, after 10th, after everything else, blah blah blah. Anyway, let's jump straight into it. Hey, what's a tier list? A tier list is a way of figuring out what's good, almost, if you want, putting things in tiers. Weird, I guess that's why they called it that. Anyway, we go from D, C, B, A to S. Does it really matter what they mean? Not really. I'm making this entire thing up. Now, this is not a stats show. I'm not going to point to one of the teams and say, this team, if we look at the stats, means this. This team's failing, this team's the best. Because honestly, as the kill team progresses, we don't have a huge number of players, and so our data becomes less and less reliable if you're just looking at win rates. So I actually think, all things considered, we can start to go a little bit more by our gut than by what stats are showing us, because our data sets just aren't large enough to really make like definitive statements, and we have to do a lot of interpretation. That's kind of what this is, really. This is a little bit of a stats show, but from the gut. Anyway, let's start from the bottom, work our way up, because that's the most interesting. Oh, quick aside, are we doing Into the Dark? Are we doing Open? Are we doing both? Good question. I don't know. I've already done the tier list. So I think for this one, I'm kind of doing everything. Yeah, it's a combined tier list. This is only specialist teams. I'm not doing compendium teams. Now, that's not because I don't think compendium is valid. Certainly there are a few teams from compendium that could totally be on the tier list, as opposed to just the compendium being the bottom tier, right? I actually thought, since the compendium hasn't had an actual update in so long, it's probably done, let's be honest. I will do a final compendium tier list soon as well. And so we can kind of re-rank for the final time and for the first time all of the compendium with everything we know now. I thought that'd be interesting. It's not that I don't like compendium. In fact, I think some of the compendium teams are brilliant, like to play, to learn the game with, to continue playing. Like personally, High Fleet are probably one of my favorite teams. Anyway, let's get into it. So in the D tier, the absolute bottom, D for dysentery, I assume. Yes, I'm going to make that up on every letter. Why not? We have... Okay, one more thing. Sorry. So, with all of these teams, I actually think player skill was such a big deal in Kill Team, and, you know, you put me up against a good player's going to win, probably doesn't matter what they're running, right? Don't think of this as, if you're in the D tier, you can't win the game. 100% player skill has a big factor to play in this. Just keep that in mind. So I'm about to say Warp Coven. I think they're probably one of the worst specialist teams out there right now. That doesn't mean Warp Coven can't beat Gallowfall or Warp Coven can't beat Breachers or whatever. They can. Player skill is a big deal. Anyway, with that said, let's carry on. In bottom place for the specialist teams, don't forget we've just had the round of buffs. We haven't seen like what those have done yet, so obviously huge interpretations. Right, bottom tier, worst team, Warp Coven. Why Warp Coven? 6 model team with 3 of them, if you misplay, only being 2 APL, makes them potentially the lowest APL team in the game. If you kill like 1 or 2 pieces from a Warp Coven misplay, you've dismantled the entire team, they can't do anything. Although they're an elite team and so have an inbuilt toughness, they are, in a sense, because they're 12 wounds compared to, let's say, 2 models from a Vet Guard, which is 7 wounds, making 14 wounds. You could kill one of these easier than you could kill like a Vet Guard or 2 Vet Guards, kind of. And it's like, oh yeah, they just kind of crumble. So if there's a misplay, this team's gone and they're just off the board. So that does mean that they're quite volatile to play. But, you know, bottom tier, makes sense. We then go to the next one. There's only 2 on the bottom tier, so, you know, not too bad. It's Worm Cult. These guys got hurt real bad with Into the Dark. So, yeah, there you go. Similar thing in a sense to the Warp Coven. They just don't have the tools they need anymore. Although I do want to say, despite the fact I've just put Wormcold in the bottom tier, if this wasn't Into the Dark, Wormcold would be way up there. I actually think if you ignore Into the Dark, and who knows what Season 3 of Killteam is going to do, I'd probably put them like A tier, maybe S tier. I think Wormcold are really good, but Into the Dark just destroys them, which is a real shame. I'd like to see them have a little buff, but it's so difficult to buff something in Into the Dark that doesn't then buff them on open. Okay, that was easy. How do we feel about that? We good? We chilled? Already a hot pick possibly? I don't think many people are going to fight me on Warp Coven there, but some people might have a few things to say about the Wormcold. Anyway, before we get to the C tier, I do of course want to say that this next little bit is a subscriber only benefit. So if you're a subscriber, open the ears. If you're not a subscriber, skip to the next tier, the C tier. And that's right, it is a double hello. Wow, so wholesome. What is a double hello? Well, nobody really knows. I guess it's a pleasantry that's given to you twice, and who doesn't like a nice pleasantry? It makes you feel welcome here. Hey, if you like being welcomed here, then consider I have a Patreon. It'd be awesome to get some support over there. I also have another channel, Full Scale Wargaming. That's about to kick off. Whenever Gallowfall comes, I'm going to post a battle report there, and not here. That's weird. It's a thing. Don't worry, my patrons know about it. Anyway, with that said, I also have other things as well, like a Discord. I have a podcast called Vantage Point, blah, blah, blah. All this cool stuff. Let's get into it. C tier. So these aren't in any particular order. I do want to stress that. So we're just going to go down the line. Let's start with the Kroot. Man, again, so if we look back 6 months now when the Kroot got their buff, or 3 months, whatever, when the Kroot got their buff, I openly said I think they're going to be top tier. I think these guys are going to be really strong. And they're not. In fact, they're still like just below a 50% win rate. Like they're not doing well. I think again this is an issue with Into the Dark and just how oddly it skews the entire game. But even if you ignore Into the Dark, I still don't think they're dominating in open tables. And I have no idea why, because I do think they're really pretty good. Don't know. There you go. So I've had to, kind of as a concession to how they actually perform instead of just my gut, say, okay, maybe I'm wrong about them. Maybe they don't actually have what it takes. So I've put them in C tier. Oh, C, what does C stand for? D was dysentery, C is chlamydia. Cool, this is the chlamydia tier. We then have Hyrotech Circle. Now, Hyrotech Circle are a weird one. They're probably, right now, the faction I know the best. For whatever reason, I've just become comfortable playing them before the buff, and now I've played them twice since the buff. So, you know, I'm getting to know them. And, man, they're good, okay? And in fact, there are things about them that are really, really, really strong. To the point that I would say they don't really have a particularly bad matchup. They're just a good team. So why on earth are they in the C tier? I think that they have a pretty hard cap against certain other teams, because at the end of the day, no matter how strong you make them, they're still really suffering from the same kind of thing as Warp Coven, which is they're kind of just five dudes with 2 APL. And then you have one good dude, and then you have a bunch of like guys that can just grab points. And I do think that because of that core design decision of making them slow, which is an issue, and 2 APL with only 5 dudes, it's like, they kind of have a cap to how well they could possibly be played. As I say, with every other team, I think that there is just something there that the top player is always going to win, right? I think that Hyrotech Circle probably have a lower cap than most other teams just because of the raw data sheets. However, they're in C tier and above Warp Coven despite suffering from the same problem as Warp Coven because they're tough as nails now. They come back and they come back at full fighting effectiveness and they're just good. However, they come back on a dice roll. And if you don't roll a 3 up, you don't have a model. And that can really mess with you. So, yeah, I couldn't in good conscience put them any higher. But, yeah. Okay, we then get to the Exaction Squad. This team, if you're on the Discord, it started off with people saying, this team is so good. And then it very quickly turned to, this team is so bad. They're an interesting team, but I think they have a bad matchup into some elite teams at the moment. And because the elite teams are very, very numerous, we're not going to see Exaction Squad really dominating. Yeah, I guess that's about all I can say about them. I think they're a solid team, and I personally wouldn't mind running them. I haven't built mine yet, because I did my proxies here to go to play on tabletop, but then things happened. So Soul Shackle, like nobody got any copies and blah blah blah, so I never actually built mine. I think they're fine. They're okay, but they have bad matchups. When they get to Commandos, now Commandos have just been buffed, so they essentially have an extra model. I really like. I want to play Commandos. I'm going to Warhammer Fest at the end of April, and I'm considering Commandos as the team that I take. We know that it's all open. It's a nerf. Because, right, what's the buff they got? If you take the Grot, you have to take the Squig. It's not optional. If you want the Grot, you have to take the Squig. And on open board, that Squig can wipe your team. So, yeah. On Into the Dark, that's an amazing buff. You basically have a guy that can kill another model. It's a straight trade. You have just removed one of their models. That's what the buff did. It's just good. On open, that's not... I mean, you really need to know what terrain you're playing on, how dense it's going to be, if you can safely move an engaged model up the board. So I'm not sure. If it wasn't for that, I might have to actually go sweaty and study the Warhammer Fest terrain. Anyway, let's keep going. We then get to the B tier. B, of course, stands for... The first word that came to my head was a Blaskowitz. BJ Blaskowitz. So I guess this is the Wolfenstein tier, which is a little bit coincidental because the first up is Kassakin. Again, these aren't in any order. So the Kassakin just had a big buff, and I think action. So when I first made this list, I put them in A tier, and I was like, no, that's too hot. Take them down a notch. So I put them in B tier because I think that, man, great buffs. 8 wounds, exactly what I think they needed. They can now melee mildly successfully. Really good. Yeah, solid. I think they're a solid team. And for anyone doubting the effectiveness of elite points, go and play the team. They are pretty good at taking out elite teams because they are just able to push through damage, right? And because of that, because elite teams naturally, there's a lot of them, you know, on the boards at tournaments, Kassakin should be doing pretty well. They can probably handily beat half of the field, if not more. So Kassakin, great buff, really good. We then get to Elysian Star Striders. Of course, they just got a nerf. I'm going to be honest, I don't know that much about the Elysian Star Striders, so I'm not going to comment too much about the specifics. They took a nerf. I guess it's my hope that they're in B tier because I don't really like the team. There you go. That's from the gut. We then get the Phobos. Now, they just got a big buff for Into the Dark and for certain missions in the Crit Ops pack. I could have put them in A tier, and from my gut, I feel like they should be A tier, but I've put them in B tier, and I don't really have an answer for that. Why have I put them in B tier? I still think that they are quite finicky to play. With the way I play them, and I've had mild success with Phobos, but I play them super aggressively, and I take Reavers, I take that forward deploy, I just go really hard, and I don't really play with their special abilities. So every time I've taken Phobos, I would probably have done better if I just went heavy assault intercessors on intercession. And like I've almost, because of the way that I play, handicapped myself by playing Phobos. So yeah, who knows? All I'm saying is they're good, but why would you play them when the way that they win, at least when I play them, I would do better with another team. We then get Corsairs. Corsairs, I like Corsairs. I wish they had the heavy gunner, the extra gunner slot, sorry. Man, they are just consistently 50%. Whoever wrote the rules for Corsairs, just one shot, nailed it, never touch them again, 50% win rate. Everybody says, oh, it would be nice if they had a buff, but like, they just don't need it. They're just solid. So great, yeah, cool. They could be higher in this tier list, like depending on how you rank things. I put them in the middle because they have a solid win rate, but like, they're pretty tasty. Cool. The only thing I don't like about them, of course, is the Kanathi spotter thing, because it's just a 50-50 roll, and that's boring. I don't like that. I don't like that. Cool, we then get to novitiates. Now, novitiates are an interesting one, which kind of, they're strong, they're good, but it seems like nobody's playing them at the top level at the moment, and I don't really know why. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe the good players out there are still playing them because they love novitiates. But the other top players have moved on, and now the things that they've moved on to have good counters, and that's why we have terrible stat data, right? So I think that novitiates are fine, but I think that as the game has progressed, novitiates have, for whatever reason, fallen behind. They're still solid though. They're right in the middle. I'm totally happy with them. We then get to the new Hand of the Archon. Much like with the Exaction Squad, Hand of the Archon, there's been more people playing Hand of the Archon than Exaction Squad because they are easily available models, easily converted, proxied, etc. I mean, I finished mine, they're right here. I finished my Hand of the Archon squad before Soul Shackle even released. Like, I'd already proxied my entire squad, as if you were watching Intel Drop at the time, you would have seen. I think, again, a really interesting team to try and get a grip on. A lot of people in Discords are saying, really strong team. Really interesting, lots of tricksy things to them. But I'm going to be honest, they seem to have a lot of really interesting tech. But I think they're really fragile and they don't have the punching power required to really hold their own. So I think at the end of the day, they're not really anything above mid-tier, you know, B tier, B Blazkowicz tier. So there you go. Don't know why. I can't really say much more about them because they do a lot of stuff and I'm kind of, for whatever reason, I haven't seen them on the board. I've played as them once and I played against them once, but like, they just don't seem to be doing much. Like, they're fine, they're good. They're in the middle. That seems to be the general answer about them. Right, we then get to the A tier. A for adventurous, because we're now in the good tier, the positive tier. Excellent, the adventurous tier. So, first up we have Hunterclade. Man, Hunterclade is so good. They're still good. Anybody that thinks the nerf that they took a couple of months ago has like knocked them off the top, no. I think people just saw a nerf and said, okay, I'm done with this team because they got a nerf and moved on. Top players were playing them, they were great. Top players are naturally going to jump to another team after a nerf, just because, you know, why they were playing at the top and they knew that they were winning games, but, you know, still difficult to win those games, it always is at the top. But after a nerf, I'm going to go to something else. Hunterclade are great. Brilliant mixed arms team. Absolutely stunning. They are another one, just here somewhere, that I'm considering for Fest. I think they're really strong, really solid. I have no negatives. They could be S tier, genuinely. I think they're really good. Okay, we then get to Vetguard. Vetguard, gosh. What to say about Vetguard, right? There's so much to say there. And yet I can't think of a single thing. And that's really the presenting style that I bring to this channel. Amazing. On this channel, I'd edit this bit out and actually say something good. Not here, not on Glass Half Dead. You're keeping all of this. No, so Vetguard are near the top because they're 14 models and they're pretty good and they have some really neat tricks. I would say the only reason they're not S tier anymore, in my view, is that I guess maybe now that I know their tricks a bit more, if you kill like 3 models, they don't do much. That's kind of it. Yeah. If you get those, I mean, you know, a good Vetguard player isn't going to give you those kills. But if they do, this team just falls apart and does nothing to you, really. So, you know, Blooded. Blooded are, they have ways to kill you when you can't do much about it, and that's kind of why they're up there at the top. But they're also a very fragile team. If you don't know what you're doing as Blooded, you're just going to die. As the majority of people did when Blooded released. For several months, everybody thought they were genuinely the worst team in the game, needed huge buffs. Blooded have never been touched. Much like Corsairs, never touched. Now, near a top tier team, essentially. So, yeah. Why are they not S tier? I guess just because of that natural lack of durability to them. And they have a ramp up effect. They're not good, like, until you've done certain things, until you've hit certain thresholds, which are not automatically achieved. So there you go. Gallowfall. So I've bumped them down to A tier. They could be S tier. They could be S tier still, probably. The nerfs they took haven't been, like, no, they've been pretty big, I guess. But only against certain teams. And certainly some of the S tier teams, I think, have pretty good matchups into them. But yeah, I mean, you know, like at this point, we're talking about a hair's breadth between all of these teams. Like, this could have been an S tier team. But I put it in A tier, so there you go. Solid team. The nerfs haven't really knocked them down too much. But again, I think we will see them start to fall in the rankings because I suspect that after the nerfs, again, top tier players that were playing them will have seen them being played and taken the nerf and thought, right, time to move on, as opposed to sticking with the team post-nerf. We then get to the Void Dancer Troop. These guys have been nerfed and nerfed and nerfed again. It's almost a shame to see them go down so far in these rankings, but I've got to say, if I'm honest, these guys are still going to wreck some face. If you're a good player, I think that because of the things that they allow you to do, they still let you skip, like, player tiers. I've explained this in a previous video. Basically, the top tier teams allow you to skip a skill level, essentially. So let's say there are 10 skill levels, and whoever is a higher skill level should beat everyone that's a lower skill level. But then if you're on the same level, that's when the team rock, paper, scissors type things, good, bad matchups in teams come into play, right? Let's say that's roughly how matchups work. All of the teams at the top generally allow you to say that, okay, well, if you're one skill level above, you still have the potential to beat one skill level above, right? These guys, 2-3 skill levels above, right? Like, because of they just get weird. If you fully understand this team, you're practically unstoppable still, okay? Really strong team, really good. No notes, really good. Why aren't they S tier? Well, we'll find out when we get to the S tier, right? But basically, they have some bad matchups now. They still have the ability to win them, but they're a fragile team. If you misplay, you're done. And it's much, much easier to misplay now as more and more factions come into the game and you have to figure out how to beat more and more things. And more things do weird things that you've only got 8 models, so you kind of can't counter, I suppose. We then get to the S tier. S stands for segways. Because segways are cool. And this is the cool tier. So anyway, I feel like I'm going to have to justify two of the top teams I've put here, right? Let's go for it. So anyway, so Pathfinders, man, these guys have been nerfed hard again and again. And I think, if I'm honest, they're in line. I think it's fine. I don't think they need to be nerfed again. Just to be clear, I do want to point that out, despite the fact I put them at the S tier. When you're making a tier list, something has to be on top, okay? It would have been a weird tier list. That would have been a great April Fool's, actually, if I'd come out with a tier list and just everything was on B. Just, yeah, perfectly balanced. Everything's right in the middle. No, the point of a tier list is you have tiers, right? Pathfinders, still potentially one of the strongest teams in the game. You have many ways to win with them. You have many different kind of archetypes of strategy in which they can win. So, great team. And their Marklights are still super effective because in general, turn 1, you don't do anything. So, you know, with every team, right? It's a slow, cautious, cagey game, turn 1. And these guys have something to do turn 1. So cool. Makes sense. Nice. Yeah, that's Pathfinders. Great. We then go to Breaches. Man, Blitz is so good, so is Breach and Clear. There's nothing else to say. The nerf that Breach has got was not a nerf. You can't reroll the other dice on Blitz. Who cares? You're like, it's a guaranteed crit and hit. You don't need to reroll. There you go. Whatever. Nothing else to say. They need another nerf. Cool. Right, we then go to Intercession. Now, why would I put Intercession on the S tier, the segue tier, if you will? So I think that Intercession is just really, really good still. I don't have much else to add. The nerf to Durable was good, you know, good that happened. I think that was a solid nerf. And maybe you're going to go Methodical now, like more often, but Methodical was already good and there was no touch to that. I personally did prefer Durable, and I probably would still generally go Durable. It's still really pretty useful. Because I already consigned myself to the fact that I'm going to be playing the thing that removes. Is it Transhuman? Or is it? No, it's And They Shall Know No Fear. I just kind of consign myself to the fact I'm going to use that every turn anyway. So that's a CP gone, fine. Not a problem, because the rest of their day sheets are still so good that it doesn't matter. And then I get Durable, so I'm hanging around on the board for longer. Yeah, there you go. You get it. Anyway, really good team. Really solid for every level of play. And that's the thing, a lot of people think that Intercession, once you're at the top tier, they fade away. But you know what? Tournament wins don't lie. They're rocking tournaments. So, tough. There's nothing else to say. And it's kind of the same thing for the Legionary here. Just go look at tournament results. Both of these teams are like in the top 3 of every tournament. Like they're just two solid and amazing teams. I don't really need to say anything additional for the Legionary. Obviously it does play quite differently to the Intercession there. But long story short, Marines, really strong abilities, really good on the data sheet, good at long range, good in melee, hard to put down. There you go. If you close with either of these teams, they have the tools to take you out. You really struggle. Obviously, there are teams that play very well into them, and that's the thing to keep in mind. I'm not saying that these 4 teams up here are the absolute best, but certainly when it comes to, I would say the only negative to the Intercession and the Legionary is that because they're the 2 most popular teams, everybody practices against you. Everyone knows how to beat you, okay? Whereas you probably don't know how to beat everybody else. And I think that's the difference between why their, for example, their win rates might be, pretty much in line perhaps, but their actual, why they're podiuming on every tournament is because you get the good players who know how to beat everybody. And then you get everybody else who's just kind of like, I want to come along for an easy tournament. I know these guys, easy matchups, right? Strong on the data sheet, don't have to think too hard. It's like, that's true, but everybody knows how to beat you, and you are relying on your natural durability and strength, whereas they are relying on beating you in a difficult manner. So if you don't know the matchup, you've just got to hope that your stats do the work for you. Whereas the top tier players know the matchup and have the stats on the data sheet to back them up. Cool. Whew. Gosh. That was a long one. Well, there you go, everybody. That's my tier list. What do you think about that hot tier list action? Do you think I was right? Do you think I was wrong? Here's the question, okay? So pick one faction that I put in that tier list, hopefully a faction that you actually know and play regularly, and tell me where I placed it wrong. And then pick another faction, hopefully that you know and play regularly, and tell me where I placed it right. Because it's great to, hey, it's the internet, we all like to be negative, we all view things in I am correcting him, and that is a valuable piece of information I can give to everybody else. But it's also a negative thing, it's a negative spin. So do that, because it's good to know what other people think about the placements and the tiers, etc. But also don't forget to do the, you know what, you're spot on. I liked your reasoning for X. Or, you know, the way I hadn't thought about it, but the way you described Intercession, yeah, you're right. They probably are S tier, despite me having previously thought they were A tier, something like that. You know, or balance in life, everybody. The positive and the negative. The compliment sandwich, as we said. Anyway, this has been Andy from Glass Half Dead. Thank you so much for watching, and if you have made it to the end, I would like to give you a big triple hello. Wow, so wholesome. And of course, wholesomeness is really what we need in this time of, am I right? Just look around you, you know. Anyway, been Andy, thank you very much. Don't forget to check out this channel, Full Scale War. It's on the back too. Look at that. I thought it all through. That was the big mistake I made in my Glass Half Dead merch. I didn't put a link. What is it? Nobody knows. But that was the... Thank you for watching. I'll see you again very soon for something very interesting. And if you want to see a battle report soon, hop over here.